Welcome to The Explainer. Cities are the absolute engines of our global economy, but they're also right on the front lines of climate change. So, how do experts actually predict the economic damage? How do they help cities get ready for what's coming? Well, it's not about gazing into a crystal ball, that's for sure. Today, we're going to lift the hood and look at the complex methods they use to forecast the financial future of our cities. So, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the huge challenge cities are up against. Then, we'll walk through the framework they use to diagnose the problem. After that, we'll peek inside the modeler's toolbox, see it in action in Brazil, and finally, take a look at the pretty sobering forecast that comes out on the other side. Okay, so let's set the stage. Cities are where it all happens, right? Most of the world's economic activity is packed into these dense urban areas. Just think about a megacity like Sao Paulo. It's responsible for more than half of Brazil's entire national GDP. But all that concentration of people and wealth, well, it makes them super vulnerable to climate shifts. We're talking rising seas, wild weather, and heat waves that mess with everything from our infrastructure to our health. And that really brings us to the billion-dollar question, doesn't it? With so many moving parts, so much at stake, how can a city planner or a mayor possibly make smart, long-term choices to protect their economy and, their people? Seriously, where do you even begin? Well, the answer, as it turns out, is not some single magical computer model that spits out all the answers. I mean, think about it. That would be like a doctor prescribing a potent drug without even examining the patient first. No. Instead, the experts rely on a structured process. They focus on diagnosing first to make absolutely sure they're solving the right problem before they even start thinking about a solution. And that leads us straight to the first crucial piece of the puzzle, a framework for adaptation. You can really think of this as the diagnostic phase. This is where you figure out a city's specific symptoms. It's climate fever, if you will, before you go reaching for the medicine cabinet. This whole thing is called the Diagnostic Adaptation Framework, or DAF for short. The best way to think of it is as a playbook. Its whole purpose is to stop people from using a generic one-size-fits-all approach. It forces everyone to get super specific about the challenge they're facing, so they can pick the right tools for that exact job. Now, the DAF really looks at the problem from two different angles. You can go top-down, which is kind of like using a telescope. You start with the huge global climate scenarios and then zoom in to see how they'll impact a single city. Or you can go bottom-up, which is more like using a microscope. You start right there on the ground, analyzing a city's unique weak spots and social fabric to figure out what it needs. So the framework breaks down into three pretty logical steps. First, you assess the needs. Simple question: what are our biggest risks here? Second, you define the measures. Okay, what can we actually do about those risks? And third, you evaluate the options. Of all the things we could do, which ones are going to give us the best bang for our buck and be the most durable? It's just a clear, methodical path from problem to solution. So once that diagnosis is done, the city knows exactly what it's up against. Now, and only now, is it time to open up the modeler's toolbox and pick out just the right instrument for the job. And this is so important. It's not just one tool. It's a whole suite of them. It's like a surgeon, right? They don't use a hammer for brain surgery. They have specialized instruments for every single procedure. While climate economists have a whole variety of models, and each one is finely tuned to answer a very specific kind of question. So here's just a little peek into that toolbox, and you can see right away how specialized they are. Some models look at the big picture, how a city's whole economy interacts with its emissions. Others are much more targeted. A central bank, for instance, might use a model like NGFS to figure out the financial risk to banks from something like a massive flood. The main takeaway here is you use the model that answers your question. This chart really drives that point home. It shows how you match the right tool to the right job, or in this case, the right sector. If your city is mostly worried about its transportation network, you'd lean on a model like E3ME. But if your main concern is land use and agriculture, then maybe GCAM is a better fit. See? It all goes back to that problem you defined in the very first diagnostic step. Okay, that was a lot of theory. I get it. So let's make this way more concrete. Let's see how one of these incredibly powerful tools was put to work in a huge, real-world study in Brazil. So for this massive project, a whole team of meteorologists, agronomists, and economists got together and adapted a specific model called EFIS. Now, it's what's known as a CGE model. That general equilibrium part is the magic here. It basically means the model treats the economy like a complex spider's web. So it can simulate how a shock in one area, say agriculture, doesn't just stay there. It ripples out and affects everything else, from jobs to the price of milk.
And to make this digital version of Brazil's economy come alive, the team had to feed it a mind-boggling amount of data. We're talking everything from how land is being used for crops versus forests, to how productive farms are, all the way to the impact on the country's power grid and even forecasts for inflation and government spending. The whole shebang. And you know what? After crunching all those numbers, the model produced some incredibly specific, tangible insights. For instance, it was able to pinpoint exactly which crops would get hit the hardest, highlighting that two of Brazil's biggest exports, soy and coffee, were facing the biggest threats. So the diagnosis was done, the specialized tool was used. What was the final prognosis for Brazil's economy? What did the model actually find? Well, the big top-line number was a projected hit of 0.5% to the entire national GDP by 2050. Now, I know what you're thinking, 0.5%. That doesn't sound like a catastrophe. But for a massive economy like Brazil's, that's billions and billions of dollars in lost value every single year. But that headline number is actually hiding a much, much bigger story, because that damage is not spread out evenly, not even close. When the model drilled down, it found that the agricultural sector, which is the absolute backbone of so many regional economies, is projected to get hit 5 times as hard, a loss of 2.5% of its GDP. That's a huge deal. And this is where a visual really helps. You can see that stark difference so clearly. While manufacturing and the service sector take a little hit, agriculture, it's facing a much steeper, much more painful decline. And this is exactly the kind of granular, actionable data that helps a government decide where to focus its resources. But the model's prognosis went way beyond just dollars and cents. It also predicted these profound social shifts. As rural, farm-based areas struggle, people and economic activity will become even more concentrated in the big cities. This could make regional inequality way worse and put incredible strain on urban areas as people migrate looking for work. And that's maybe the model's most important finding. This isn't just an economic problem, it's a deeply social one too. Which, at the end of the day, leaves us here. These unbelievably complex tools, from the diagnostic frameworks to the economic models, they don't predict some fixed destiny that we can't change. They give us a forecast. That's it. It's like a weather report telling us a hurricane is coming. It shows us the path we are currently on. The real question they pose, not just for Brazil but for every single one of us, is this. Now that we have the tools to see the storm coming, what choices are we going to make to change the weather?